All right, so Bob, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Sure, and thanks, Kerry, for that, and thanks for your efforts in putting this together today. And I appreciate everyone making time out of their busy day for what I am sure will be an informative discussion around the Biomass Crop Assistance Program. I also want to thank our speakers today, and Kerry's going to introduce each of them individually. But Kelly Novak from the Farm Services Agency, Steve Brink from the California Forestry Association, Ryan Stroshine, a partner of Lloyd Ritter's at Green Capital, whose firm was very involved in representing the ag and energy sector on this issue, and Steve Coonan from the U.S. Forest Service. So thanks to the speakers and thanks for all of you. And with that, Kerry, I'm going to turn it over to you to do individual introductions, and then we can start.
Great. So we were going to start with Ryan Stroshine. It doesn't look like he has been able to dial in yet. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Steve Brink, if that's okay with you, Steve.
Sure.
Steve is joining us from the California Forestry Association, where he's VP of Public Resources. And let me put up his PowerPoint presentation. 1 second. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay.
We can. Yeah.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, thank you very much, Kerry. So as Kerry said, I am with the California Forestry Association. We are not a state agency. We're a trade association. The remaining sawmills, veneer mills, many of the biomass power plants, the large industrial forest landowners in the state. Next slide. So I'm going to try to be quick here. The focus of what my comments are going to be, next slide, Kerry. The focus of my comments are going to be around implementation of BCAP. So California, of course, has a substantial number of wood-fired power plants. It has dwindled over the last few years. We had 5 or 6 close, but we still have a large number. And most of those were very interested in signing up again to be approved facilities. However, many have paused here in the last week when they found out there was a September 26th drop dead date for moving the fuel, because they're very nervous that fuel suppliers aren't going to get approved until probably sometime in August. So there's only 1 month to actually move the fuel. So they're not sure it's worth the time. But we will have somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 15 plants that would like to be approved, to be my guess. Next slide. Next slide, Kerry. Yeah, thanks. So a typical biomass pile in California, they're rather large. If you look at the center of the screen, you might see a kind of a green dot near the bottom of it. Next slide. That's our state legislative lobbyist who's standing in front of that pile to give you some context of the size of these piles that are all over the place now in northern and central California, in part due to the closure of 5 power plants. Next slide. And so where we're at least in California, is on public and private land combined, we create about 1 million bone-dry tons of wood waste from forest harvesting activities that's being piled and burned each year. This is the portion that's uneconomic because it's just too far from a power plant. So we have a wealth of supply, both on public as well as on the private land for BCAP. Next slide. The other thing that's interesting now is the California Air Resources Board finally is willing to publish that nearly 50% of the black carbon emitted each year in the atmosphere from California are from wildfires. And so we're basically chasing fires now in California on the national forests. They're in control of the landscape. The Forest Service is not. And so that creates another huge aftermath issue for the Forest Service of salvage, which again creates an enormous amount of biomass. Next. And this happens to be the rim fire in Central California that was last year. And from private and public, over the next 2 years, I predict there'll be at least 700,000 bone dry tons just from the rim fire that's available, and it's all uneconomic to take to a power plant. So you can see that just from this one activity right here, we could generate a $15 million BCAP proposal for biomass removal. So the point is, there's ample supply just in California to soak up all the funds. And so obviously, I'm sure everybody wishes the pot was bigger, but it's not, so we'll do our best. Next. So our issue right now is that the fuel suppliers will have a window of July 21 to August 25. We're very, very nervous that even if a fuel supplier gets his application in early in that window, we aren't comfortable what the approval scheme is going to be. Is it going to be a matter of a couple of days? Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 3 weeks? The point being that we have probably at best a 4 to 6 week window to actually move the fuel. And for California, that's right in the middle of the fire season. And there could well be fire restrictions on being able to chip and load at that part of the summer. And so we wished we'd have understood that September 26th fiscal date was in the mix here, because we've been in there pounding on the table in Washington, D.C. to get the facilities approved in March and get the fuel supplier applications in April, so that we could have had a 5-month season to move material. And we would hope that something more along that timeline is where we'll be at for next year's part of the program. And with that, I'll stop, and thank you very much, Carrie, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was really helpful. Appreciate that. Ryan Sturshine is having some technical difficulties here dialing in. So we're just going to go ahead and have Kelly Novak go, if that's okay with her. And, oops, sorry. Kelly, is that all right with you if we can just kind of go ahead? Whoops. There we go. Just unmuted you. There we go.
Now I'm unmuted. Okay, yes, that's fine.
So I'm going to go ahead and load up your PowerPoint. We're going to move ahead with you, and then when Ryan's able to call in, we will go to Ryan. So
I'm on. Can you hear me?
Oh, Ryan, thank you. Yeah, I can hear you now. Kelly, maybe we'll just go ahead with Ryan, since he's going to give kind of the background of the whole program. We'll just go ahead with him, and then we'll circle back to you, if that's okay.
Okay, great, and that's great with me too. I apologize for getting on late. I apologize. I'm having some massive computer issues here at my desk. I had a PowerPoint prepared. I am not able to share it with you, so I'm just going to go through and give an oral rundown of what I was going to try to show you, and hopefully I can lay the groundwork for the program and certainly answer any questions that you guys might have after I'm done. So a little background on the program, a little background on me. I'm a principal at a firm called Green Capital out here in DC, and we're very active in kind of the renewable energy, agriculture, sustainability space, and we're active in founding an entity called the Ag Energy Coalition, which formed with Biomass Power Association as one of our founding members to support BCAP and the other important energy programs in the Farm Bill, and just to have a real focus on rural energy programs throughout the federal government. And so we've worked closely with Bob and BPA throughout this process. and have been very active in the Farm Bill. The energy title of the Farm Bill first appeared in 2002 in that Farm Bill, and it was very small, kind of just a toe in the door type of title to the Farm Bill. And in 2008, it was greatly expanded, provided there were new programs added, and there was much more money provided, about $1.2 billion, give or take, in funding for energy title programs in the Farm Bill. So a significant expansion and recognition of the importance of energy from rural parts of the country. And in fact, the title of that bill even had energy in it. It was the Food Conservation and Energy Act. And so those programs really got up and running, most of them as a result of the 08 bill. And as we came into the 2012 expiration of that bill, we were focused on trying to extend to those programs and get them the resources they needed to continue to be effective and impactful. And so that was the genesis of the Ag Energy Coalition. And we started out in a pretty big hole because there was no budgetary baseline for these programs. And so we had to proactively try to find the funding to get these things, get the resources that it needed. And the chairman of both the House and Senate Ag Committee, when they rolled out their first versions of the bill back in 2012, neither one of them had any funding, any mandatory funding for these programs. We started at square zero with both of them. And so we went to work through the Ag Energy Coalition, doing your typical lobbying, grassroots, letters, meetings, the whole gamut. And we're able to get some traction on the Senate side. And in the Senate markup in 2012, we were able to add $900 million in funding for these programs through an amendment process. So 2012, the process fell apart. We came back in 2013. By that point, Chairman Stabenow on the Senate side had gotten some religion on this, and so she had included money the second time around. And we were able, as the bill went through the Senate, to hold on to that $900 million. The House, different story. We were never able to get them to include any money for our programs, and so we, focused on holding on to the good work that the Senate had done as we went through the process. The House, when they voted on their version of the Ag Bill the first time in June of 2013, their version of the bill actually failed, and that almost never happens. If you ever follow the House, they don't bring bills up that fail, and it was a surprise and a kind of a rebuke to the Speaker and to then Whip, now Majority Leader McCarthy. So I say that to emphasize the point that this was a very difficult process. There was a lot of opposition to the overall bill, not so much to our programs, but the politics of the overall bill. And so they went back, changed the bill, stripped out a bunch of money for food stamps, and were able to get it through the House. It went to conference for months and months and months as they tried to hammer out the differences between the bills. And finally, in February of this year, they got it through both the House and the Senate with pretty good bipartisan support in both chambers, and were able to get it signed by the President. So of the $900 million that the Senate included in its version, we were able to hold on to $881 million of that over the life of the Farm Bill. So quite a bit back, certainly from the $1.2 billion of the 08 bill, but still a pretty considerable victory considering where we started and considering the fiscal climate that we're operating in out here. So we were very pleased and appreciative of BPA's help in that success. Some of the programs, I know we're here to talk about BCAP. There's a few others. Biorefinery Assistance Program got significantly funded. That's a loan guarantee program now. Used to have grants, no more grants for biorefineries, and also biochemicals now. That provision was added so that they're eligible. The REAP program, energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. These tend to be smaller projects that are in rural areas, wind, solar, biomass, biogas, energy efficiency, geothermal, things like that. Very popular program that was funded and extended through this Farm Bill. And then, of course, the BCAP program. It probably had the most changes. There were no new programs created in the Farm Bill this time, but the main ones all survived and were funded. BCAP is funded at $25 million a year. The CHST matching payments limit was dropped from $45 a ton to $20 a ton. On the establishment side, that went from 75% down to 50% with a maximum of $500 an acre. So some changes that are relatively significant, but by and large, the programs all survived intact and were all funded with mandatory money. There's still an opportunity for the appropriators to come back and swipe some of that money in the annual appropriations process, and so we've already been up to the Hill talking to them about how important these are and how it's vital that they don't rob these funds to pay for something else. So we'll be diligent and ongoing on that front. And you know, if I know there's some, it's not a perfect program from the eyes of the people within the Biomass Power Association, and if you're thinking about the possibility of maybe getting Congress to amend this program, I will tell you that's going to be very hard for a host of reasons. It was a very delicate balance that they struck on the bill overall to get it done. There's a lot of folks who really still don't like it at all and would love another chance to gut it if it got reopened. And I don't think the chairs of in either chamber would support going back in and trying to make changes to the program. So a statutory fix or modification to the program, I think, is a pretty heavy lift. And so I think I'll leave you with that and just maybe give folks a chance to ask any questions at the end. And certainly, if you've got questions on this program or even broader political questions, I'll be happy to take a stab at that. So I'll stop there and welcome any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. By the way, Ryan is VP. He's attorney and senior partner at Green Capital LLC. Didn't do the full intro for you, Ryan, but thank you for that presentation. We actually have a couple of questions at this point, so I think that we'll go ahead and address those because I do know that Steve Brink has to get off early. So we'll go ahead and do Ryan's question first. Bob Cleves is asking, how can Congress rob the program if the funding is necessary, or if the funding is mandatory?
Well, yeah, you would think with a term like mandatory funding that means that they absolutely have to spend the money, but unfortunately, there's a process in the appropriations that the appropriations committees use called CHIMPS, which is changes in mandatory spending. I forget the exact acronym, but changes in appropriations for mandatory spending, I think it is. Anyway, long story short, even though there's X number of dollars provided in mandatory funding, they can, through the appropriations bill, change that and say, notwithstanding other provisions, this program will only have Y number of dollars available to it in this fiscal year. And then they'll take the rest of the money, whatever they decide, and they'll put it into another program. So the authorizers, which are the Ag Committee members, hate that, and it really drives them crazy when the appropriators do it, but it definitely happens, and it's something that we're always on the lookout for, and these programs have been targeted in the past, so we know that it can happen again.
Okay, thanks for that. And now we have kind of two pretty related questions, so I'm just going to give them both to you. Steve Brink is asking, what is the projection for funding next year? And Bob Cleves had a follow-up question. If changes are unlikely now, when is the next Farm Bill? So those kind of seem similar, so I'll just give those both to you and let you address both of them at the same time.
Sure, so I'll take the second one. The current Farm Bill is authorized through 2018, FY 2018, so it will expire September 30th of 2018. So they would start having hearings again on the next Farm Bill, probably maybe that spring, so 4 years from now, I would say. Regarding funding for the next year, I'm going from memory here because my computer's down, but I think it's $25 million per year every fiscal year throughout the life of the program. So that is what should be available. And I don't think and maybe our USDA folks could clarify this. I don't think that these sums carry over. I think the USDA has to spend them. Sometimes they'll put a provision in law that says, to remain available until expended or something like that, which means that any leftover funds can carry over year to year. Without that language, I think USDA kind of has to spend the whole $25 million in the fiscal year. And again, that's subject to this CHIP process that the appropriators could undertake, and they could abscond with some of that money, and we could be left with less than $25 million. But that's what the Ag Committee has said those programs that BCAP should receive.
Okay. And then Steve Brink actually has a follow-up question. He thought that BCAP was only a 2-year program.
I may have to respond to that via email. I don't have the statute in front of me.
Okay. That's great. Thank you so much, Ryan, for that. It looks like we might have another. Oh, okay. Actually, we've got another question teed up, and this is for Steve Brink. And we're going to go ahead and address that right now before going on to Kelly, since Steve does have to leave early. Chris Trott, and Steve, I unmuted your line, so I'm just going to read you the question. Chris Trott is wondering, BCAP requires the facility to pay fair market value for similar materials. Does this mean fair market value for materials loaded on the truck or delivered to the qualified facility? The delivered cost of qualified biomass will vary depending on the hauling distance. Will this be recognized?
That's a great question from Chris, and I'm going to have to defer it to Kelly on how they are going to operate in terms of the monitoring and approval process for the supplier applications and the payment.
Okay. All right, then with that, we'll go ahead and go on to Kelly. Just want to let everyone know, if you do have questions, just want to remind you, go ahead and type them into either the questions tab or the chat tab, and we'll address those as they come. And again, Steve Brink does have to leave at 12:45, so if you have a question for him, go ahead and get it in soon if you can. And now we will go to Kelly Novak. Let me unmute her line really quick. Where is she? Oh, there she is. Okay. And
I'm here.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to go ahead and mute Steve. It gets mad at you if you unmute more than 5 at the same time, so I'm just going to be careful about that. All right, so Kelly Novak is the program manager for the Farm Services Agency at USDA, and she's also joined by her colleague Steve Kennan, who is acting deputy director of forest management at the U.S. Forest Service, also USDA. So they are both here. Kelly's going to present, and both Kelly and Steve are here to answer questions too. I'm going to go ahead and start her presentation. 1 second here.
While you're doing that, if I might interject, I pulled the statute up. This program is authorized through every fiscal year through 2018 for $25 million. So it will be funded through the life of the program for 5 years.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yep.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, if I had my wish list, Congress did not fulfill my wish list, but they did not put in there until funds expended. So it does mean that at the end of every fiscal year that we have to return funds that are not obligated, meaning that they haven't been put on a contract with either a producer who's a landowner or an operator, or somebody who is an eligible material owner, or for our technical service providers. So unfortunately, that means that it makes it harder to manage a program because we have to do everything on a timeline that ends at the very end of our fiscal year, September 30th. So I guess I'll just start there. If you would go to the next slide, please, Carrie. So Ryan gave you an overview of how this all began in 2002, but the initial authorization of the program happened in 2008. We're under the energy title of the Farm Bill, that's Title IX. So it does make some changes in the way we do deliver the program. For instance, if you're doing a project area and you're doing acreage enrollment, it means that we're an energy program, we're not a conservation program. So we are bound to doing practices on the land that are energy related. Conservation, if it's required, it's paid for by the producer, which is the landowner operator. So that's just one of the highlights to what it means to be under Title IX, the energy title of the Farm Bill. Also, we had, as Ryan already mentioned, some changes in the 2014 Farm Bill from 2018. You note there that we had 23 different language changes. Not all of them are significant, but there were a number that were significant in the project area side of the program, which would have made it very difficult, even timing-wise, with all those changes to make adjustments to forms, application processes, and then to get everybody signed up. So what has happened for 2014 is we move forward with just the matching payment portion of the program on a very limited scope with the time we had available. As you have heard, it was February when the Farm Bill came out. We do have an interim rule in place that was put out September of 2011. You might recall that there was a final rule put out in October of 2010. Most people weren't aware that we put out an interim rule in September 2011. We were able to do so because they put a cap on funding at that time. There were a number of different alterations to the funding stream from this program. And when they put out the funding stream alterations in fiscal year 2011, we were able to put out an interim final rule that gave this program a little bit more discretion on how to use the funds and how to move forward with timing issues that we have with the program. Next slide, please, Carrie. So, as I mentioned, we're only doing matching payments. That's the only new activity for fiscal year 2014. Anything beyond 2014, I can't really speak to. As Ryan alluded to, there are some possible funding issues that could happen with mandatory funding. So we do still need to put out a final interim rule, so no activity will occur after fiscal year 2014 until a final interim rule is put out. So for this year, this year fiscal year I talk about is only through September 30th. We're going to be doing just the matching payments on a very limited scope. And I'll talk a little bit here in a slide to come about the changes for matching payments. But I just want to say, too, that the project areas, of course, will reintroduce those after the final interim rule is out in fiscal year 2015. I'll make note as well that we are going to be doing later on this summer an advance notice of final rulemaking. And in that advance notice, what we're requesting are for parties who are interested in the BCAP program to give us feedback and comment on some of the big questions as to the direction that this program could go after the changes that have been made in the 2014 Farm Bill. It will also ask a lot of information or comment feedback about what all of you see as technical assistance that this program can provide. In doing so, I should say that one of the big language changes to the program this year was that Congress allowed us to take technical assistance funds out of the funds that are available here. All $25 million, any budget that we had prior to this time, was all done directly toward payments. That means that we have no salaries and expenses that come out of this program. That's all paid out of a separate budget to manage the program. Any IT, any automation, any support staff, Everything is taken out of a different pot of funding, but now Congress has changed the language and said that technical assistance can be provided for the program. So we'll be asking information and feedback on what technical assistance would best be used for this program to move forward. Next slide, please. So the first notable language change that we had that applies to matching payments is that under biomass conversion facilities, they added a new purpose for conversion. Previously, the law had only said for matching payments, you can be converting the eligible material to heat, power, bio-based product, or advanced biofuel. They've now added in the word research. So this means research toward the commercialization of the heat, the power, the bio-based product, or advanced biofuel. This is very key to this program because its purpose is advanced biofuels and bio-based products as well as the heat and power. And as many of you know, there's a lot of material out there that could be used to further the development of advanced biofuel and bio-based products. We don't have a lot of operations right now that are truly just in the cellulosic realm and doing commercial production at this time, but they're on the cusp of it. So that really gave this program a nice segue or a nice avenue access for those facilities out there that are truly engaged in advanced biofuel and bio-based products, but they're still in that pilot or demonstration phase. We now legally can take them into the program under the matching payment and support some of the supply that they might be using to maybe reach demonstration hours or maybe do some testing. So move to the next slide, please. So to restart the program for matching payments under this very limited scope of matching payments, we put out in the Federal Register on June the 11th a notice of funds availability, and it said that the funding that would be available for the program would be $12.5 million for matching payments. The reason that it's $12.5 million is because one of those language changes from the 2014 Farm Bill said that the Farm Service Administration, in administering this program, would on an annual basis use no less than 10% and no more than 50% of the annual budget toward matching payments. Because time is short, because we did know that we were not going to be moving forward with BCAP project areas, we took the determination and discretion to invest the full 50% possibility range toward matching payments for this fiscal year. Although time is still short, it still opens up the opportunity for eligible material owners to make application for and apply for tonnage support and delivery of up to $12.5 million worth of eligible material. So next slide, please. And here's the big change. The biggest change of all is that it is now $20 a dry ton is the matching payment rate that is eligible, not to exceed that rate. And I think that one of the questions here was about this 2-year period. There's a lot of confusion because people see this program as being just the matching payment portion of the program. We also have the project area side of the program. So this program goes beyond 2 years. Although a material owner is only eligible for 2 years to receive payments under BCAP matching payments, the program itself is set up to be authorized through 2018, as Ryan pointed out earlier. But an individual who is the eligible material owner or an entity is only eligible for a 2-year period. And we do clock the 2-year period. We've had a lot of questions about it. We do clock the 2-year period kind of in stops and starts. It's difficult because an agricultural residue, we have cropping seasons. So we know that 2 crop years will equal 2 years for eligibility. However, when we get over into the forestry side of things, things can be ongoing. They can be stop and start throughout the year. So we've taken note of that. We are, at this point in time for this fiscal year, clocking just from the approval date to the end date of the contract. That's the time period that gets applied to that 2-year window of eligibility for each individual or entity. Now, beyond that, moving forward, that is something that we will ask for response on when we put out our notice of advanced rulemaking this summer. We're going to be asking questions to that effect. We're going to be asking for feedback and comment on how to clock that 2 years for eligible material owners that might have woody residue coming, forest residue that is. And also because of the fact that we do have stops and starts according to when we have the funds available. So we'll be asking questions on that, but just for clarification for this fiscal year, and I know it does make a difference to the material owners as well as the facilities, that 2-year window is not clocked on a consecutive, continuous basis because it would be unfair to material owners because the funding just isn't available, and the opportunity is not a reimbursement opportunity, it's a matching payment opportunity, and we only allow for funding for the deliveries during the time that the contract is valid. So I'll move on to the next slide.
Okay, so what that means is, if you're
I'm sorry, who's speaking? I'm sorry, who's speaking?
That was Steve Brink. You need to mute me again, Carrie.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that we didn't have somebody else speaking for the Forest Service over there, because I know that Steve's on.
He's muted now.
Okay. The other big change here is the dry ton. Previously, in the 2008 Farm Bill, they said nothing about dry tons. That came from policy, but this year they've said that it's a dry ton. And so we had a large number of comments from the proposed rule and from the notice of funds available concerning the dry ton with woody material. We had a white paper that was developed by the U.S. Forest Service in response to some of those comments, and although it was not instituted in the policy on the last go-round and our interim rule, because we did not engage in any woody biomass for the matching payments, since we are moving forward with woody material on this round and it is in the law as a dry ton, we chose to put into the notice of funds available the information about what would be a woody dry ton. And so we are following the advice of the white paper that was provided by the U.S. Forest Service, and we are instituting that the applicable ASTM standard, that's the American Society for Testing and Material Standards, are to be applied for any woody material. If there were examples that were given in the notice of funds available, as well as our field notice as to what is some possible ASTM standards. Our FSA our FSA office and our forest technical service providers can give more information about those specific standards if questions do arise and a facility or an eligible material owner that's potentially looking at this program would like more information on. So next slide, please. And then this is the big change. This is where it narrows the scope quite a lot. In the interim rule that was out in 2011, we had narrowed our woody residues, our forest residues, down to what's been adopted by the law in 2014. In the interim rule, we did say that the materials would have to be harvested or collected directly from the land. So this means that no more wood waste that was manufacturing residue or was separated after the point of delivery, this includes a lot of our orchard waste as well, will now be eligible. It has to be directly from the land. And when we say directly from the land, that means it ties it into a conservation plan, a forest stewardship plan, or an equivalent plan. And this means that we're tracking everything down to the very field level. So when a When an eligible material owner comes into our county office at this point, they're going to have to present a forest stewardship plan. We will actually map out, if it's not mapped out at this point, we'll map out and assign a tract and a field number. And the tonnage expectations that will be collected or harvested from those lands will be noted. It will be evaluated by the National Forester or the BLM National Forester for 2014. And so an evaluation to ensure as well that it's a byproduct of the preventative treatment that's either a hazardous fuel reduction or disease or insect infestation reduction or containment will also be certified. So it's a very tight operation this time. It does have a very processed approach. We have chosen to go with the National Forest System lands this time as well as BLM lands because we are aware of the very short scope of time that is available. It would take quite a long time for the state foresters to work with private landowners at this time to get a forest stewardship in place if there was not already one in place. In addition, they would have to offer an evaluation. So due to the shortness of time, we have chosen, and we did identify this in the Notice of Funds Available, that we would be moving forward based on this change alone with just going onto the National Forest System or BLM lands. And that change did incorporate, as I've already noted, that it has to be a byproduct of a preventative treatment. That means that it's not a byproduct of a timbering process or a lumber operation. It has to be a byproduct of a preventative treatment. That means that there's a forest stewardship plan out there, and it has on it specifically that the harvest or collection that comes off the land is going to be for hazardous fuel reduction or disease or insect containment or reduction. The last part of the change in the law that also was reflected in the interim rule that we had out in 2011 was that the woody material must not have an existing or higher product market. We are asking for self-certification on this year in 2014, which means that the material owner themselves will have to assign and make certification that this material prior would not have been used for another market. And we do give a definition of what the existing product market would have been. That is in the final rule as well as noted in the Notice of Funds Available. So next slide, please. Is it moving? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we are also doing agricultural residues this year as well. This means that this is also harvested or collected directly from the land. It has to have a conservation plan. I know that many of you are aware that we, in crop years 2010 and 2011, that would be fiscal years 2011 and 12, we still did operate the program for matching payments open just to herbaceous residues. And that would have been a lot of corn stover. So we did support farmers in 2011 and 2012 with the removal of corn stover. And that was to facilities that were actually using the corn stover for the process of advanced biofuel production. So this is not new to the Farm Service Agency offices that are out there. They did partake, and we had over 100 different producers out there, eligible material owners that were actually in the process of doing corn stover removal. So this was an activity that was already ongoing. We've changed it a little bit this year to say that it's agricultural residues, so that allows in some of that orchard waste. We've had a lot of greening disease. A lot of our agricultural producers have lost out. In some cases, if they're not collecting or getting assistance for other reasons, this is also a good avenue for them to consider the waste that they have from their orchard through this program. It's a possibility. So it is opened up to agricultural residues this time, and I want to make note that an agricultural residue is a crop residue. We've had people come to us and say we've been growing mesquite on, or we have mesquite growing on our agricultural lands and we'd like to rip it out and have it applied to this program. But this is an agricultural residue, a crop residue. So it's intended to be that residue from a dedicated energy crop, something that would have been planted there for the purposes of biomass, bioenergy production. So if I can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, and so this is just an overview again of, and I'll speak to a little bit of the volume that we can expect for 2014. And also based on the constraints of what the funding has available. So I have mentioned already that Congress in the 2014 Farm Bill held us to not less than 10%, not more than 50% of our annual funds would be used for BCAP matching payments. And I have said that already that we've chosen this year to give the maximum amount of 50%, that $12.5 million, to matching payments. And if we were to do an assumption at a rate of $20 a dry ton for the $12.5 million that's available, that gives us a support of up to, for the delivery of up to 625,000 dry tons of material to facilities, and that would be across the country. To give you an example of federal woody materials that were delivered in 2009, and that would have been without any of the extra pieces there for byproduct of a preventative reduction or preventative treatments, excuse me. And we were able to at that time expend $13 million, and that went out largely to 30 to 40 different facilities. So you can kind of get a feel for what the volume might look like this year, how many facilities that might include, how many tons that might include, and across the country. Of course, the largest areas that have federal lands this time, National Forest Service lands, and for BLM lands are obviously going to be the states and the counties that would be active in this program for 2014. And I'll move on to the next slide, please, just to give you some information about the timeline for this year, for fiscal year 2014. We've set things up differently. We're now not unlimited dollars, so we have more of a process approach, as I mentioned earlier. And so June 16 is when we opened up the facility application period, and they'll be giving applications. We'll be taking them in until July 14. This is not a first come, first served basis. Not all the facilities that apply will get chosen for qualification. And so after July the 14th, on or about July 21, we'll be making an announcement and posting the qualified facility listings on the BCAP web page. Now, after July 21st or about, it will be the opportunity of the eligible material owner to walk into a county office and who might have a contract with the qualified facility and say they would like to sign up to receive matching payments for deliveries that they will be making to the facility. This means that when they come in, say, example, they came in on Monday, July 21st, they already have a forest stewardship plan in place. They're able to work with the county office and get that forest stewardship plan evaluated by the National Forester. They get all their paperwork back in. They get their contract approved, say, the beginning of the next week. After they've got the approval of their contract, they're at liberty then to start doing deliveries to that facility. And whatever tonnage they claimed on that contract, and according to what was approved by the Forest Stewardship Plan, that, or by the Conservation Plan, excuse me, that is the material that will be delivered on or before September 26th. So their delivery date start time can begin at that point in time, and it would be a delivery to the facility by September the 26th. And again, I'll point out that the reason we're held into September 26th is because the legislation does not say until funds expended. So if we wrote a contract past our fiscal year, we would be doing harm to our program We would be out of compliance with federal rules and regulations itself. So we have to write contracts that end on September 30th. So we're only opening up deliveries until September 26th, which gives material owners the time to come in by September 30th and apply for their payment. The application for a payment has to be submitted to the office, the county office, by September 30th. If you don't show up with your paperwork that shows that you delivered and that you're requesting the reimbursement, or not the reimbursement, excuse me, the matching payment, then you've missed out. That obligated funds will go back to Treasury, and the material owner does not get payment for the delivery that they made. We've been making this absolutely clear. Our legal counsel did set this up so that we don't override any of our legal obligations for the funding that's come to us. And so those are the parameters that we're working in for 2014. And again, we have set periods of time for application for the facility, for the material owner, and for deliveries, and then also for the application for the payment itself. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the phase we're in right now until July the 14th, and this is for the facility application process. Facilities right now, they are to know that if they were qualified previously, that will not carry over to this round. They have to reapply. Anything that they might have had pending from, say, 2012 that they might have put in an application, we're not taking those and we're not moving forward with those as a brand new application. We have a brand new application process, and all the forms and the updated forms are now available on the website. And we have requirements in the instructions for one of those forms, the BCAP 1 form, for them to fill out specifically according to what we're looking for. So there have been some changes on how they're to fill this out. So we have to take a brand new application in. We're not going to be extending. And even if you were qualified in the last round, it does not guarantee that you will be qualified in this round. This is a much different application process, as I've pointed out. And again, research is a viable conversion, research toward the bioenergy commercialization. And so this is just outlining over here too on the location for this application. We're still taking them in at the FSA state office. They do get moved here to the national office. It's at the national office where we'll be working with the Forest Service and with our technical service provider, NRCS, to do selections of the facilities. The selection does come from the administrator's office, and those selected qualified facilities will be posted out on the website on July 21st or so. Next slide, please. And so this is just an outline of the process. I want to point out here during the state review that the facilities have to sign into a brand new agreement. That agreement is only good until the end of 2014, fiscal year 2014. So it's only good through September 30th. If we do move forward with another year later on in fiscal year 2015 with more matching payments and the process opens up again for applications, there is potential that you wouldn't have to put in another BCAP 1 form or the forms that go along with it. You may only need to re-up things with an agreement. We're not aware yet of legally what will be required when we reopen up again. So I just ask everybody stay tuned and bear with us, but legally we're bound to this agreement ends on September 30th of 2014 for the facilities that get chosen as qualified facilities. Another point here is that the application, again, is taken in at the FSA state office where the facility is located. And we'll be operating very much similar to that when we get to the material owner side of things. They'll be putting in an application in the county office or where the land is located or where existing records occur for that producer or eligible material owner. Okay, so next slide, please. And so I just want to state here again that this program is not only about matching payments, it's also about our project areas. So when we do get the final interim rule out in fiscal year 2015, we will also be restarting project areas as well as a restart for matching payments, and again, according to funds availability as well. And so next slide, please. I just want to talk a little bit about our next steps on our project areas because we've had some changes that Ryan mentioned as well. Most of you may know or may not know, but we do have 11 project areas in 12 different states. 11 states have enrollment, and we have enrollment of up to 48,000 acres of different varieties of dedicated energy crops. We have everything from shrub willow to hybrid poplar to 2 different varieties of cloned miscanthus. That's a fast-growing grass. And we also have warm season grasses. We have 2 smaller project areas that do an oilseed crop that is camelina. So we have a variety of crops, and we did take in a lot of applications in 2011 and 2012. Something to the tune of over $1 billion was requested for those project areas. And the project areas are ongoing at this point in time. Most of the contracts for the herbaceous were for 5 years, and for our woody dedicated energy crops, they were up to 12 years. So those are ongoing contracts, and they are viable and moving along at this time. They have been established. Some of them are now in the process of doing a harvest collection and working with facilities to do deliveries. So the first change that came from the 2014 Farm Bill that we have to contend with is that they've capped off what we can offer for establishment payments of the perennial crops. We're now bound to 50% versus the 75%, and it's capped at $500 an acre, and then $750 an acre for the socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers and operators. So we have to consider, though, that the selection process for project areas said that we were to consider those already established project areas and talking about how we could advance the maturity of those project areas. And this is a key point for a lot of people who are interested in this program, is that if you are going to offer us a response comment this summer to our advanced rulemaking notice, we want to know how is it that you mature a project area, and especially in the context of now we can only offer cap of $500 an acre, as whereas before some of the establishment costs that were being offered were 75%, which was higher. So we need to figure out how it is that we can help these advance to maturity. Is it a matter of, in some cases they've had stand losses. Do we go back in and do we assist with reestablishment of stands? Or is it a matter of assisting those that are having a hard time with their facility financing? Is it just a matter of also expanding the number of acres or expanding the location of acres within a project area? These are the kinds of things that we need to hear back for program management of this program and to respond to a change like this from the law. We also now have the ability to take in expiring CRP acres, and as some of you may know, the CRP program has been cut back in large numbers over the last several years. They've lost a lot of acres. A lot of people, especially the conservation-minded folks, have come to us and said, well, wouldn't it be great if CRP acres could be taken in for bioenergy purposes, especially in those warm season grasses locations. So we want to hear back from the general public as well about those CRP acres and what we could possibly do to include them in the program and also in consideration of monoculture situations. So those are just those are some of the highlights. I'm sorry, I just lost my screen here. I'm trying to get back to it so I know where I am. Bear with me. not the first time it happened in the middle of this. So we also have that to contend with, and then also technical assistance I've already talked about. And then just to give you an idea of the volume of acres that we could support for expansion of project areas on a year-to-year basis, with doing the math on everything and knowing what we know about the capped amount now for establishment costs, and because we do obligate all the years out of just one fiscal year, we could probably do, if we had one annual project area, one perennial that was just grasses, and one perennial that was woody, we could probably support an expansion for project areas of up to 15,000 acres a year. But again, that would be spread out amongst 3 different project areas, and these typically have anywhere from 5 to 8 counties included, where people sign up, producers, and they get a contract. And they do follow a conservation plan and any mitigation and monitoring that might have to be done for those that are potentially invasive. So next slide, please. I just want to point out we have a BCAP webpage that's loaded with all the information. Everything I've gone over here is on there. We do have a 4-year report that we put out after we did our first 4 years from 2008 to 2012. And that is up there under background, just above those red arrows that you can click on and see how we performed. It gives a lot of information about how the project areas did. It goes down to the detailed level of even what was the average acreage size of a project area enrollment in a certain county, how much were we paying. We do things based on a soil rental rate in the project areas. So it gives a little bit of information about what the average producer was getting paid per acre. And then we talk a bit too about the matching payment portion of this. We talk extensively about what we did with corn stover from 2011 through 2012. And of course you can see here at the very bottom, for those interested right now in putting in a biomass conversion facility application, all the materials are on the website. You can pick them right off there and then work with your FSA county or state office to get the application in. And last slide is just, I'll take questions at this point. And I'm done talking, and I hope I haven't used too much time. I think I did.
No, you were great, Kelly. Thank you so much for that. There were so many details that were really helpful for everyone to hear. We do have a lot of questions for you, so I'm just going to run through them, and we'll do the same way that we've been doing. I'll read them aloud to make sure that everyone can hear them, and then turn it over to you and Steve also. First, from Gordon Bauer, what is the ranking system for projects not first in line?
Okay. Well, we don't really have a ranking system, but I will say this. Obviously, the more competitive facility applications would be those facilities that are going to be taking deliveries of the eligible material that's been targeted for this fiscal year. So that's those facilities that know their suppliers and know where their materials are coming from. So it's going to require a little bit of footwork probably on the facility side to work with their suppliers and know if their material is coming from National Forest System, BLM, or if they've got ag residues that would be eligible. It's going to also take a little bit more communication probably too to just ensure for the facility's sake that they already have a forest stewardship plan in place, or they already have a contract, or they already have a conservation plan that allows them to remove so much stover or a certain cut on some of the warm season grasses that they might have planted. So that's as much as I can say to it there. We've got a limited amount of dollars that we can work with, and we will have, you know, a certain number of facilities that will apply, and we'll work it out the best we can to make sure that this opportunity just gets the best return possible.
Great, thank you. Also, just as a note to everyone, when I ask your question, I will also unmute your line so that you can ask Kelly any follow-up questions you have. Next, we're going to hear from Roland Allred. He's wondering, We burn rice hulls to make electricity. Rice is harvested and delivered to a mill where the hull is separated and then transported to our biomass facility. Are we eligible for BCAP?
So you do a separation of the material after the delivery. Is that what you're saying?
Rice is harvested and delivered to a mill where the hull is separated.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that's not directly from the land. So I would have to say no, that's likely not eligible from what I understand at this point. So it has to be directly from the land. So again, none of those manufacturing residues are going to be eligible. You ship a log to a facility, they debark it there. If they do debark it there, that bark's not eligible for this program. So.
Okay, great. And Roland, I wasn't able to unmute your line, so if you have any follow-up questions, just type them below. And also, everyone, we're past the time that we said that we would end the webinar. I'm just going to keep asking questions, until we're done. So feel free to stay on. Love to have everyone stay. Okay, so next we're going to hear from Frank Dennis. He's wondering, do existing Forest Service / Bureau of Land Management projects need to be approved by an FSA TSP?
Well, we do have Steve on the line, but before I would pass this question to Steve, I just want to say that our technical service provider for this program, our technical service providers are the National Forest, the National Forester, the BLM Forester, and NRCS Conservation. So we have them, there should be a plan already in place, and if it requires evaluation for the woody materials, which it does, they would have to go through and do an evaluation of the forest stewardship plan. That's as much as I can say to our part of the process, but maybe Steve wants to offer some more information on their side from the Forest Service perspective.
Basically, can you hear me? I got to make sure you can hear me first.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, can you speak up just a little bit?
I need to speak up a little bit?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. There are two things. First of all, where we're at right now, given the short period of time, we're only going to be looking at existing NEPA-cleared projects with these 4 categories that Kelly had mentioned earlier. So those are going to be the primary areas that we're going to be looking at. And they will have to have NEPA coverage. So as long as the FSA, we have our folks that will be going out into the field, and we're providing training to our sale administrators and to our folks so that they can make these assessments. And as long as they go out there and can make that assessment, and it is covered by by those 4 criteria or categories that were identified by Kelly earlier, then they would be accepted. But we're not going to be looking at any new projects at this point in time. Given the shortness of the period of time, it's going to have to be existing or projects that already have NEPA clearance on them and are essentially under contract and already moving forward. Hopefully that answers this question.
All right.
Kelly, yeah, Steve, it answers the question for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Steve. All right. Next question is from Anthony Calandrello. He's wondering, would citrus groves that are cut down due to greening be considered agricultural residue?
That's a good question. I thank you for it. If there is a conservation plan on the orchard, and this fits the compliance, and NRCS does the actual conservation plan and says that this is applicable, as long as the collection harvest is in line, well, the collection in this case is in line with the conservation plan. The delivery does not occur until after the approval of the contract with FSA. So that's the time when from the orchard owner or operator will come into the county office and get the approval done. which means that the conservation plan has to be reviewed and make sure everything meets what we require for the BCAP program. After all those steps have been taken, then it is likely that the material then would be eligible, but that's provided you have a qualified biomass conversion facility in the area. So that's as much as I can say about that.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Next, we're going to hear from Gordon Bauer again. He's wondering, how long do you expect it to take the applications for material owners to be approved?
That is a wonderful question. Well, we have a much more controlled process this time, so we'll know in advance where our facilities are located. We will know in advance then where the locations are, which county offices will likely be doing most of the activity. We'll be doing an extensive computer training with them so they can process the automated application and then get the contract approved in a more timely fashion. I can't speak to the relationship back and forth of how long it will take us to work with our technical service providers. I will say, though, that our technical service providers in the past, when we've been in a crunch situation, especially with our experience with project area sign-up, they have worked on a very cooperative basis with FSA and gotten the job done in a timely manner so that the producer, the landowner operator, was able to get through with their contract, all in a timely fashion. So I have every expectation that this will be done as timely as possible. And we do work a lot with our state and our county offices to provide them as much support as possible from the national, especially on the automation side. So.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Next, from Chris Trott, he's wondering, can you give us some examples of why a BCF application may not end up being qualified?
Well, specifically, there would be some of the reasons why previously facilities that applied when we weren't on a limited budget were not chosen. Being out of status on your permits, that is one reason not to be chosen or selected as a facility right off. Having an incomplete application, information is not presented that does not allow us to review the application in a competitive way. That would be another reason why a facility wouldn't be chosen. If there's largely lacking information in a facility application, it would be hard to review them on a competitive basis. We have seen that before, where people actually who fill out the forms for the facility don't fill in any of the pertinent information. So it's extremely important to work with the FSA state office if you're a facility expecting to put in an application and you're very hopeful to be selected, that you first get the form filled out correctly, you sign off on the agreement. It's important that you understand the agreement too, that when you read through it, especially that section on the fair market value. It's also important for facilities to fill out all of the paperwork. That includes what we have is called the AD 1047, and that's if you have any issues with suspension or debarment from other programs, that needs to be looked at and filled out. Believe it or not, we did have facilities before under the notice that we did in 2009 that were not able to come into the program because they had issues with suspension and disbarment. So those are some just kind of overall factors of why a facility may not be chosen or reviewed in a competitive way.
Okay, thank you. And then Chris has a follow-up question. If a facility does not apply to become a BCF this year, will they be able to sign up again next year?
Yes. Again, the next fiscal year's activity will be largely dependent on funds available. It will also be timing-wise dependent upon when we get the final interim rule out and when funds do come to the department.
Okay. And finally, Chris wanted me to be sure to ask you his previous question about fair market value. So I'll just read that again. BCAP requires the facility to pay fair market value for similar materials. Does this mean fair market value for materials loaded on the truck or delivered to the qualified facility? The delivered cost of qualified biomass will vary depending on the hauling distance. Will this be recognized?
Well, when you have a contract with your eligible material owner, we do require, you will see there in future information that comes, as well as what was already in the interim final or the interim rule from 2011, that we require that you have a binding contract with your material owner. So we need to know up front exactly what you intend to pay. In some cases, we've seen it before with agricultural residue, that people want to do things on a sliding scale. If you have a definite sliding scale that's been communicated to the material owner and the material owner is in agreement with that's a fair market price, that will be something that will be reviewed if there's a question about whether or not a facility's paid a fair market price. Of course, the history on what you've continually paid to the material owner would be also something that would be subject to scrutiny if there's a question about whether or not you've paid the fair market price. We do have, again, I'll point out, technical assistance funds for this program now. So that means that we can use our funds for the purposes of compliance. So if there are questions that are brought up, we will be able to review them from the technical assistance perspective. And things won't be moving as quickly as they were before. So if there is a question of fair market price that's brought up, and when we choose to suspend the qualification of the facility, it not only hurts that material owner, but it also hurts the rest of the material owners that would have been delivering to the facility. So those are things for the facility to consider. We do ask, though, that if you have questions, further questions about that, that you ask them at the time of when you're signing the agreement, because you are signing into paying a fair market price. And if there's any question about whether or not the facility has paid a fair market price in the future, those are the types of things that we'll be looking at to determine whether or not the fair market price was actually adhered to.
Okay, great. We have another question. Are you saying all projects that meet the requirements of the law will be qualified, or will USDA select certain projects from the universe of qualifying projects? If the former, money is available until it runs out before the end of the fiscal year, correct? If the latter, what is the criteria for picking and choosing?
Okay, it sounds like we have I'm not sure if we have a question about project areas or if we have about matching payments, but I'm going to answer it as to matching payments because that's what we're doing for this fiscal year. So the number of facilities selected, would we open up or add more facilities later? It sounds like that's what the question is after that cutoff date or announcement of July the 21st. That is a possibility. If we find that funds are still not being actually used or obligated, is the way I'll say it, there's a possibility that more facilities could be added to the list of qualified within the fiscal year. There is a possibility too that we could extend the time that the facility owner, or excuse me, the eligible material owner has to sign up. We've currently got them only eligible to come and sign up for deliveries until August the 25th. So there's a chance that we could extend that as well. So we've left it flexible to work as well as we can within the parameters that we have, to make sure that the funds are available, that 12.5 million, to all those that have been qualified, have been approved to actually get in there and earn the funds from a matching payment point of view.
Hey, Kelly, this is Bob Cleaves, and I was I was one who asked that question, and let me just make sure I understand, because I think it's just my failure to be using my brain properly here. Are you saying that the ultimate selection of a biomass of a qualifying project is that the USDA is going to pick those who participate in the program from a universe of a broader number that can be qualified, or are you saying that everybody that can be qualified or is qualified under the law will qualify for payments, and then just it's a question of how much money is available between certain dates?
Well, the facility never receives a payment. It's the material owners that receive the payment.
Right. Okay.
And so we're qualifying the number of facilities that we can possibly have reported to us, kind of like what's their universe of consumption. This is really more about not the universe of facilities, about their universe of consumption. Okay. So if a facility reports to us that they can consume 625,000 tons in a month, which I don't think is likely, then it doesn't leave much room if we qualify them for other facilities. So I'm not speaking to any one reason why a facility is chosen or how many facilities will be chosen, or if we're looking at this according to the universe of facilities. We also have a larger consideration, and that's the number of dollars that are available and the consumption that is being reported by the facilities that are applying for qualification that actually meet all the criteria for application.
Thank you.
All right, we will go on to Mike Davis's question. He wants to know, what is a socially disadvantaged farmer?
That's a good question. There's a definition that we use, and it is under, I believe, I'm going to look it up for you right now because it's already included in the final rule and the interim rule that were used in the years of 2010 and 2011. And the socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher for the project area side of things that we use comes from Section 2501E of the Food and Ag Conservation and Trade Act of 1990, and that's 7 USC 2279E. So that's where that definition comes from, and just to put it in layman's terms, it's the definition that does not include women. So that should give you some background on it.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Next, we're going to hear from Debbie Thomas. She's wondering, is there anything stipulating a qualified BCF must purchase biomass from a qualified producer or collector?
Well, there's nothing stipulating that there's a must situation. There obviously is a must situation if they were approved as the qualified facility and the material owner wanted to submit for a payment for delivery. We would have a situation there where the material owner would definitely need to be approved, but it doesn't mean that the facility can't go on and continue its day-to-day operations and continue to purchase from other material owners that aren't qualified. They can still do this as well. Even on the application side, if they choose to only report what they know will be approved facility or eligible material owners, or who are in the situation that could seek approval, they can report that as well. But it doesn't prohibit them from telling us about the other sources of materials that they're consuming, or it doesn't prohibit them from consuming other sources of materials that aren't BCAP qualified.
Okay, just going down the list of questions. Frank Dennis wanted to say thanks for taking his question before. Gordon Bauer is wondering, do you want the entire body of each permit submitted or just a title page / signature page?
Yeah, if you look at the instructions for this, we do say that we would like the title page with the date and the corresponding contact information for the department where you submit the permit to.
Great. And then I think this is the last question. Feel free to send follow-ups, everyone, but from Gary Milo with Michigan Biomass, he's wondering, are there arm's length requirements between the BCF and the eligible material owner? This was problematic for vertically integrated companies in the previous version of BCAP.
That's a very familiar question, and the answer to that is no. People who stepped away from this program after 2009 may not have been aware, but we had the final rule and the interim rule that both indicated that there would be no prohibition on arm's length transactions. We have operated since the final rule was passed in October 2010 without any mention or kind of intonation toward any prohibition towards arm's length operations. So.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. I'm just going to put Bob on unmute again. Thanks, Kelly, for answering all those questions. That was a lot of information. We really appreciate the time that you spent with us today. And same goes for Steve Brink and Ryan Stroshine, who I think they both had to jump off, as well as Steve Kennan. Bob, do you have anything to say to wrap up this webinar?
No, just, Kelly, I really appreciate this. This is enormously informative, and thanks everybody for participating. It really clarified a lot of aspects of this program, and we appreciate our continued partnership with USDA on the overall wood energy initiative, and this is just one more example of ways in which I think the industry can work closely with USDA and other agencies within the federal government to promote our industry. So thank you.
Thank you, and this is Kelly. I'd like to point out here too, our partner, the Forest Service and BLM and NRCS, our technical service providers, they've been kind of quiet in this, but they've actually offered a lot of assistance and a lot of back and forth, and they will be very engaged in the future on this. But we really are quite grateful to the services they've provided so far with just bringing us to this point, because otherwise we wouldn't have had much to offer for 2014. And so we're just very thankful that they could step up and help us out and get this done.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for calling in today, and thank you so much to the presenters for these great presentations. And if anyone has any follow-up questions after the webinar, please get in touch with me, and I will get it to the various presenters. Thanks again, and have a good Friday.
Thank you.